Hey, this is Stephen Amell, and you are listening to Tomorrow's Legends, the podcast. Don't fail your city.
You think you know the story. You've heard it 100 times. But this is not the tale that you know, for this part of the story has yet to be written. Join Flash, Harley, and X-Force 11 as they take the Wave Rider into the near future and check in on some old friends. This is the new adventures of Superman and Lois, as chronicled by Tomorrow's Legends.
Yes, Happy New Year, Superfam of Steel. Well, we couldn't end 2024 on a sad note with the end of Superman and Lois, so why not kick off the new year with one last visit to Smallville to see how the Kents are doing? And we thought we'd drag in our Cybercast network friends as well to get their final thoughts and feelings now that they were able to finish the series. So with that, let's put on our checkered button-up shirts and head out one last time to the Kent farm. I am the Flash.
And I'm your eye in the sky green butterfly.
I am the Silver Box.
I'm Harley Quinn.
I'm your blue beacon of hope, X-Force 11.
And with us for one last time...
Hello, Legends.
There's Gideon. All right. We're, well, I guess we should say Happy New Year and Happy Holidays to everybody out there, to all our listeners. We are coming in actually on New Year's Day. Pretty cool. We're hanging out, getting a whole Cybercast finale network feelings about Superman and Lois. So you guys are listening to Tomorrow's Legends, and we brought in with us the Dive into DC host. You heard them, Silverbox and Green Butterfly. And there's also the Mandalore on there. Unfortunately, D. Vizsla could not join us today, nor could Dreamweaver. They're both busy today. So, but we're going to basically talk about Superman and Lois and get everybody's feelings after it's been, 2 weeks now? 3 weeks since it ended? Mm-hmm. Something like that? Yeah. So,
yeah.
Revisit the series one last time. But as always, X-Force has got a little bit of news for us. Let's see what he has to say.
We interrupt this podcast for a special report.
Well, as of today, January 1st, all 4 seasons of Superman and Lois are on Max. So now you can watch the entire series there. So season 4 just got added today, so be sure to check that out.
Yeah.
And Lanterns is set to start production on February 10th of this year, and we'll be getting it mid-26. So, until that time, we're going to be covering the Justice League/Justice League animated series, and we'll start with season 1, and then at the end of January, we'll run through that, we'll take a break, and then go on to season 2, and then we'll map things out. But we'll be covering that. They're 2 and 3 episode arcs, so we'll be covering those stories as an arc, and again, we look forward to having y'all as a part of that.
Yeah, it's a great cartoon, guys. Lots of fun. It's not all just for kids. There's a lot of adult humor in it. It's a great show. Flash is just hilarious in that show. It's the Wally West version of him, and he's just a big flirt and got a lot of attitude. He's hilarious.
Nice. Jeff, if anybody's interested, I just put up in our Facebook group, which is www.facebook.com/groups/dive into DC podcast. I just put up the whole renovated DC Studios schedule, which lays things out from 26 to 27 and all the different projects and things that they're looking at. So again, if anybody's interested and wants to check that out, we've had a few changes over the holiday season with the Batman Part 2 getting bumped out to October 27. So they've updated everything as of now. So again, if you want to check that out, go for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks.
Head over to Dive into DC because they will have all the news and changes and updates for you. That's what you guys do best. You cover all that stuff. So
yeah,
check them out. Well, let's get into the beginning of the show here. We actually got some pre-show feedback happening because people sent in some feedback.
Letters lost in the timeline.
While we're all celebrating holidays, who wants to read Comic Geek Kev? Go ahead, Jess. We haven't heard from you yet.
Oh, goody. Okay. Hey, Legends. wasn't screening the notes at all. I'm honored to be the recipient of the contest prize. Unrelated.
Yeah.
I had a thought about Jordan saving John. At first, I didn't get it, but I rewatched it and had a thought. When Jordan was going at super speed, he started to glow, almost like from heat vision. In the comics, Superman has had an ability to solar flare. Basically, he releases all his stored solar energy at one time in a single blast. It leaves him drained till he can recharge, but maybe it was something like that. Jordan releases some of his stored energy, solar energy, and it jumpstarts John's heart. It looked like Luthor hit him with something red. Maybe it was a red light bomb. So he was depowered and needed a solar infusion, and to him, it was like a yellow sun bomb, so he asked if Jordan blew him up. Just a thought. I guess we'll never know unless you speak to someone from the show. Off to watch the Justice League. I give my winning the contest a big 10 out of 10 thank yous. Until next time, Comic Geek Kev.
Awesome. So that's actually a good theory. It makes sense. I wish they had explained it a little bit more in the show, but it does make sense.
Yeah, I agree.
For sure. But your prize, I will be getting that out to you shortly. The Canada Post strike is finally off. They ended like a couple days before Christmas, so it's been like a mad scramble, and there's tons of parcels that are delayed, and the whole country is pissed off. So it's I'm waiting for that to die down before I go wander into the post office, because I just don't want to be part of that.
The lines are going to be huge.
Yes. Oh. All right, and then truly, this really fits the letters lost in the timeline. Daryl Washington sent us feedback to be part of our finale show, and it never showed up. And I couldn't find it anywhere. I had to run through a couple tests with him, and finally we got his email coming to us. I have no idea. It didn't show up in spam. It didn't show up anywhere. I don't know what happened. So we're here to make amends and make it up to him. And X-Force, read what he had to say.
I want to start off with a quote from Reddit. It felt like they really rushed through the battle just to get into the wedding and what happened next scenes. I see some of the writers are big fans of the Supergirl series finale because that's exactly what they did. I really don't have feedback in the traditional episode-specific sense, but more of an overall series thoughts.
Perfect.
When it was revealed that Jordan had powers and not Jonathan, it was a disservice in a way that it was written, even as it set up an interesting dynamic over the course of the show. For example, when we see Jordan being taken to the fortress for the first time, but not Jonathan, Clark should have taken both of them to the fortress together. I read that they wanted to bring Lucy back, but just weren't able to. Makes you wonder how they would have done it, because what they did with Lucy in Season 2 was character assassination, even if it was a doppelganger and not the Lucy we grew to know on Supergirl. Side note, happy birthday to Jenna Dewan, whose birthday was December 3rd. I amusingly like to think of Sophie Cushing as the Where's Waldo of Superman and Lois. She appears in plenty of episodes, but I have to wonder why they gave the Cushings 2 kids and not do nearly as much with one of them in terms of plot. Is it because the Kents have 2? Any show, no matter how good, has its pitfalls, and it was definitely pitfalls with the infidelity drama in the Cushing family. Sarah cheats on Jordan, which I feel was unnecessary, and Kyle cheats on Lana, which to this day I don't understand.
Me neither.
For real.
I want to close out by saying don't forget where the show started, and that's Supergirl. If Tyler hadn't gained such popularity on his appearance there, none of us would have this show we have grown to so enjoy so much. I just feel like some of the fans forget that. If COVID-19 hadn't turned things upside down, this would have likely been a show still set on Earth Prime, and we wouldn't be forced to retcon that appearance by Diggle. We followed Diggle on a Green Lantern journey they ultimately couldn't follow through on, and suddenly we're expected to think that the Diggle on Superman and Lois is a different one. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to find something to watch in my quote-unquote new chair. Lex, Bruno, come here.
Yeah, good stuff. I know me and Daryl had a little bit of back and forth going on your Dive into DC page about Superman and Lois owing what to, and we're actually going to talk about that. I just want to get you guys' feelings. That'll be one of our first things we get into today. So awesome stuff, guys. Glad you guys got that, were able to get those feedbacks in over the holidays, and I'm sorry, Daryl, of that missing out on the finale, but it kind of actually is perfect for the show with what you had to say. So good stuff. Let's get into the talking points. I've got some questions I'm going to basically ask you guys, and we're going to everybody's feelings. Now that the show is done, let's get into that. All right, Silverbox and Green Butterfly, you guys sent us in feedback for our finale because you guys hadn't been able to get to the end of the series yet. But now that you have finished it and you're caught up to us, we want your final thoughts on how it ended, what you thought of the direction they went, and the decisions they made to tell a future story about Superman and Lois that we've never seen before. Green Butterfly, you can start first.
I was pretty heartbroken with the decision that they made to end in what I consider to be a really, really sad place. I thought that since we got to see Lois beat cancer during the series, that I wanted her to just survive, long term. And I know, like, in reality, that's not the reality for a lot of people, but I wanted the show to stop before it got really, really sad, because I didn't think that brought more to the story. I did like the flash forward ideas. I just wish that we wouldn't have to watch our beloved characters die, because we all know that is how life ends, and they had set it up pretty nicely that we knew now that since Superman had a human heart that it was going to be different for him. But I would have preferred ending on the happy scenes that we were being shown with their grandkids and growing old together, and just know that death was going to come for them, because it comes for all of us. But to witness it, I felt was heart-wrenching and really made it hard for me to finish. That was one of the most, and that speaks to how well they do things on Superman and Lois, that I was so emotionally wrecked as we were heading into the final scenes that I really had a hard time finishing.
Yeah, I feel you. I mean, I've watched it several times. I think I've watched the finale 5 times, and I still am tears rolling down every single time we get to those last 10 minutes. It is hard. It really tugs on the heartstrings. But I feel like they did it in a way that you can still kind of feel good. They got to live a pretty full life together despite the illnesses they were suffering, which I think was a nice way. But it does suck, like you said, to have to watch your characters die. That's not easy.
I mean, I feel if it would have ended, 5 minutes before that or 7 minutes before that, it would have just ended with such a hopeful feeling. And that's what the House of El symbol is hope. And I was feeling so hopeful when they showed, hey, everybody's fine. They had grandkids. Look at all this great setup. And then it just went very sad very quickly.
I hear you. Silverbox, what do you think?
Yeah, so I echo a lot of what my partner is saying here. I think, and I haven't even gone through our notes. I'm not sure how grand of a scope we're going to get. I think for me, what the finale did was it took these characters literally into places that we've never gone before. We'll talk about the impact of how it started and where it went and all those things I know. But for me, the fact that they chose to create an ending, a literal ending for this, I think was one of the most bold moves that the creatives could have done. I think what was lacking, and I think where this might have kind of filled the hole for you, Green Butterfly, is if we had seen in the future, if we had seen Jonathan and Jordan doing Superman stuff. I mean, even if it was a montage of, quick, here's all the different scenes of adult Jonathan and Jordan doing the Superman things, I think that would have turned the whole feeling of, okay, we're just at the brick wall end, right? Because it's implied that they are going to continue this forward, but we don't see it. And I think that's the hard part, is if we, not only do we know, but if we see, right, that the Superman legacy continues, then I think it changes that whole thing. Because for me, seeing the ending and seeing Superman's resolution with all these different things, and when he forgives Lex, I mean, that just undid me, right? So I think there's, and to me that speaks of hope more than anything else, right? So yeah, this was an incredible ending to a series that I think is groundbreaking. And again, I don't mean to dominate the whole conversation, but I think we're going to get there. But I think it suited it perfectly. So.
Well, and based on what you just said, I mean, that's why we need a spin-off show about the boys, or even just a TV movie to continue the story. And give us that future that you were mentioning. Yeah. That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
they've talked about animated, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the questions I had come up with today, of asking you guys of, we've had spin-offs in the Arrowverse. That's how the Arrowverse grew. So you would definitely be on board if they continued it, the next generation of Superman with the boys?
See, I don't think a series like that works. But I think, because there's just not going to be enough draw, I think, for the general audience. But in an animated form, in a comic book form, in that kind of thing, yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that goes. So,
well, John already has quite a bit in the comics. Unfortunately, there's not that many issues to have John and Jordan, but Jonathan has a lot of comic book stories to himself.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Well, excellent. I mean, we'll get into a lot of the questions here where you guys can expand on your thoughts, but I just wanted your kind of overall feelings of how I thought the show ended. And did you at least enjoy it? Like, you guys watch it and you go, wow, that was a good finale?
Absolutely, I did. I think, when you said, hey, I watched this 5 times, I think that ending is etched in my brain so completely that when I rewatch this later, I'm always going to be just stopping it at the happy ending part. And I know what's going to happen. I know what unfolds. And I also, one of my favorite scenes is seeing, is like heaven, Clark has died and he opens the door and sees Lois in that dress. Now, I think I'll never forget that scene. Yeah. But will I ever be able to emotionally take watching them take their last breath again? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of with you.
I
have not rewatched it, and I probably won't.
Oh, really? So you only watched it the one time for our show? That was it?
No, I watched it twice. That second time was harder to watch than the first, and that's all I need.
Yeah. It's just the magic of how it finishes.
Just picture makes me want to cry.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's tough. Well, that's a good start to the show. I want to get some controversy out of the way right away before we dive into big discussion. I've got a question of debate, because I know everybody feels differently on this, and I'm just going to kick it off with my feelings. And this is just my feelings. You guys know I'm very steadfast in how I feel about things. The first question I want to ask you, because this has been hotly contested on the internet: does Superman and Lois owe anything to Supergirl? So for me, because this is a hot contested topic, even after the ending, it kind of bothers me that as great as this show was, how near perfect of storytelling that this show had, there's still people out there that want to ruin the emotion of the finale and having to say goodbye to some of our favorite characters we've ever had by screaming about what it owes Supergirl and never getting a payoff on the show. So this is where I stand on it. This show, this world, these characters, I don't feel owes anything to Supergirl. It was established early on that this is a different Earth, a different world, and different versions of the characters than what we saw on Supergirl. They also made it very clear that Superman is the only powered super being on this version of Earth. So essentially, they're bluntly saying, there is no Supergirl. She doesn't exist here. So that should quiet everybody and stop the crying for the cameos that I heard over and over and over again, or even just mentioning her name on the show or seeing a picture of her on the fireplace mantle or whatever. She doesn't exist in this world. It's as simple as that. But what I do want to say, though, is Tyler and Bitsy, I believe strongly, do owe everything to Supergirl for giving them the chance to greenlight their own show after guest starring and being introduced on Supergirl. These actors got to have their own series because of guesting on Supergirl. So I believe the actors owe everything to them because it was their entry point to these characters, and because even though they guest starred on Supergirl in the crossovers, it wasn't guaranteed anything was coming after that. They just happened to knock it out of the park, like Daryl said, and the producers raised their eyebrows going, oh, maybe we got something with these guys here. Let's open a new show. So I'm kind of like, I have like a split feeling. I think the show itself, the world that they built, doesn't owe Supergirl, but the actors and the people involved owe everything to Supergirl because they gave them the chance to carry on these characters. That's my feelings. I want everybody else to kind of explain what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think that's basically where I've decided that I stand as well, more or less. I definitely think Tyler and Bitsy, like 100%, and maybe like, you know, the actual people that like ended up doing the show, like, yes, they got the chance on Supergirl and they were given that opportunity and they shined. They did a great job and everybody loved their characters and wanted to see them do more. And I think where they had the opportunity to stand out was to differentiate themselves from the Arrowverse, from the feel of the Supergirl show and all of that. And I think they did a really fantastic job in kind of making it their own and making it a standout hit for the 4 seasons that they had. So yeah, I more or less agree with you. I think absolutely the actors, the creatives owe this chance that they had to Supergirl, because without that show, then they never would have considered having Superman and Lois in the Arrowverse. Like, it just never would have been considered without first having Supergirl. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that's pretty much how I feel about it. It's not a strong hot topic for me. So,
yeah.
I think the show and the actors owe something to Supergirl and the Arrowverse because we wouldn't have this show without them. However, it's almost the least connected show in the DC TV era. I would give that honor to Stargirl because, you know, of being on that different Earth and not the much ties that way. But while Superman and Lois is not tied into the Arrowverse, and the take of the main characters in the Superman and Lois show is different than what we saw in Supergirl, I feel there's a tie to Supergirl because of her optimism, her hope, her drive are reflected in this version of Superman. And I think Tyler took the tone that Melissa set as Kara and kind of made that the tone for Superman. That's true to Superman's character. We've seen different takes on that character, but I think that optimism, that just the tone that she set as being that hero, he kind of took that, maybe made it a little more serious in some ways, but I think he took that over there. So do I think we necessarily needed to see our version of Kara in the finale? No, I think it would have been cool to see a version of Kara that's in this universe, that's his cousin, but they really didn't have time for that, and they just didn't have the budget either. But I think there's some ties there, there's some owning there, but I think because the nature of the series, they had to just keep it contained within the show. So yeah, I think there's some ties there, and there's some things owed, but once again, they were constrained by what they had budgeted and other things there.
I like that. I'm really curious between Silverfox and Green Butterfly where you guys feel, because Supergirl was your show. That's your where your hearts are and where you've started this journey together. So I'm kind of curious where you land on this debate.
Well, so I lay this whole thing at Todd Helbing's desk and say, all of this is your fault. That this is even, I mean, seriously, that this is even a debate. There's no reason that this should be a debate, because they chose to treat this Superman and Lois. Okay, so we are now in officially the DCU canon, right? So that timeline is going on, and projects like the Batman and the Penguin, those things are considered quote unquote Elseworlds, right? So that's exactly what Superman and Lois was. Here's the Arrowverse timeline, and here's Superman and Lois are going to be, they are Elseworlds. Okay, that's great. If we just would have said that from the beginning, that would have set the whole thing, and there wouldn't have had to be a debate about whether this thing is tied to Supergirl or not. But the problem was they brought in, just like Daryl said, they brought in Diggle and his whole searching for the Green Lantern thing, right? They brought that piece into this world. Right? And they explained that no, that's not the same Diggle. Okay. And in the very beginning, when folks were asking for ties, right, then Todd Helbing should have come out and said, this has nothing to do, right? But he knew he had a tie and an obligation to the Arrowverse, because that's where these folks came from. So he was politely trying to remain tied to the people who brought him here, but then at the same time he was saying, but we really don't want to have anything to do with that whole world. Fine. Just say so. That's my whole thing, right? So to me, this is totally Todd's problem. Excellent argument. Yeah, I agree totally. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Green Butterfly, I just realized you're wearing the shirt, right? Is that what you got on?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, just my shirt on today.
Yep, 3 of us do.
Nice.
Jess and I are cold.
Yes, I'm cold.
I have my coat on too because it's freezing.
All right, Green Butterfly, I'm curious where you land on this.
Well, my knee-jerk reaction when I was reading the notes before coming on today was, yes, absolutely yes, all caps yes, just yes. And then I was thinking about it, and I understand where all you guys are coming from, and you have already said it eloquently before me that it is the particular characters do owe to Supergirl because they were premiered there. That's where Tyler Hoechlin became our Superman. That's where we met our new Lois Lane. That's where we fell in love. So, yes. Yeah. I will always regret that they made this Elseworlds, but yet dripped in those little things that made you question, okay, is this Elseworlds or not Elseworlds? Because I wanted it not to be Elseworlds. One of my favorite things about the Arrowverse was being rewarded as a fan by watching all the shows at once and getting all these little Easter eggs that you only will understand, like tiny little inside jokes, if you watch every show every week and you keep up and the timeline interconnects with each other. I mean, they even put this version of Superman and Lois in the comic books with other Arrowverse characters, and then still tried to tell us that, hey, this isn't an Elseworld. So
I didn't know that.
I feel, we covered it last year. There's a comic arc,
Earth Prime.
Earth Prime that
I remember. Okay.
that has them in there, and I enjoy Tyler Hoechlin Superman with Supergirl, with our version of Supergirl, Melissa Benoist, so much that I was sad not to have her. I was sad that it was established that she didn't exist, because I thought over these years, over this time, how many fun storylines we could have where she could pop in and assist with certain things. So I always regretted that it was being sort of forced into an Elseworlds timeline. I think that it does the characters do owe to Supergirl, like everyone's saying. And I can also say that as a fan, I was disappointed that it was forced onto its own timeline after seeing the chemistry between the actors on Supergirl and knowing that that could have really, really worked out. Even if they wanted to and just show how these timelines evolve on comic books all the time, where people do get pushed off of timelines and the timeline restarts, it would have been really fun to me, I feel, if they could have had a part of a season or something that was connected before it divulged due to some big event, so that we would have had something connected. So that part will always disappoint me. But as the years went on, I did get used to the fact that I knew she didn't exist there. So it started to bother me less as the show went on and established itself as to what it was going to be. So I never got involved in these debates online anymore because, well, I never did from the beginning, because I always felt like a showrunner, I have to respect the art of the showrunner and the writers and the directors that they're going to take. You know, whether I'm disappointed in the element or whatever, or something like that, I don't get into these online debates because I want to sit down and watch the story that they want to tell me and not judge it until I've watched the story. And in the end, even though I was disappointed by some things of it not being interconnected, I found many, many ways to love this show for what it is and stop thinking about what it's not.
Yeah.
See, and that is why I wanted to hear from you guys, because I've always felt like Sorvakshi, you kind of come in like a judge. Like, you kind of see everybody's perspectives and then you pool all that information together and you give us a very distinct answer. And then Green Butterfly follows that. No matter what the situation, you can find the silver lining. You see the light in every dark corner, no matter what it is. And that's why I love your guys' perspectives, because you just... I'm very emotional, and I have emotional driven perspectives and you know, ways I like to see things. So for me, it's hard to step outside and look for the things that you guys continue to look for. So that's why I appreciate your guys' thoughts all the time. And looking at my, like, even though I said what I said, it doesn't mean I disagree with you guys. I fully agree. It would have been cool if the show was connected. If we had everybody together, if Kara visited our show once in a while, that would have been fantastic fun. but they established that it's not going to happen, and that's where I kind of, like you just said, I started separating myself from needing to have that anymore. But it would have been cool. It would have been fun if we could have had all our crossovers again and all that stuff. And I think it was Daryl that said, like, COVID screwed everything up, so we lost all our crossovers in those last couple seasons of stuff. So awesome thoughts, guys. Well, let's move into some fun questions now, all about Superman and Lois. My first question: what does this version of Superman do better than all the previous incarnations? That includes Lois and Clark, Smallville, the movies, the animated series. What does this version, the way they told the story about these characters, what does it do better than the other ones?
All right, well, I'll go ahead and start off here. I am going to say the realism. And I'm going to be careful not to mention anything that I know Jeff wants to talk about, but the way that they've like brought the characters to life, and at its core, it's about superheroes. It is a superhero TV show, but I feel like they brought a level of realism to the show in the way like that the stories were told, and the way that it was shot, and the way that everything was kind of like crafted and put together. And yes, we still had these like fantastic like superhero elements, but it didn't always, and in fact mostly didn't feel like a superhero show. So I think that's a really big credit to the writing, a very big credit to the actors as well. They were able to live and breathe in these characters as if all of this could really be going on very believably, like all around us. And even when you got to some of like the crazier things, the stuff with Doomsday, like the things that could have been very campy, very over the top, very comic booky, I think they did an excellent job of keeping it grounded and realistic, even though it's a comic book series, if that makes sense. So I think that's what they did better than any other version I've seen.
Yeah, totally.
For me, it's marriage and family. We see a married couple who worked to make their marriage work. We saw them work to raise the boys. We saw them deal with serious issues of mental health, pregnancy loss, cancer, family dynamics, and so much more. What it did is it just enriched the Superman canon for me. I've said before that I was a Batman guy. I grew up, enjoying Batman. I like the Superman movies. I love Smallville. But Superman and Lois just made the Superman canon and that character much richer and fuller for me, because I got a feeling of who he was beyond the cardboard cutout of what we see in the movies, that somewhat 2D version. So this version of giving him a family life and this rich dynamic just made it so much richer than anything that I've seen before.
Yeah, I would just tack on to that and say that they went there. They ended the character.
Yeah.
And so we've never been in a world where Superman comes to an ending. And so I think this whole season's rather arc of making him vulnerable to the point. I mean, we've seen the death of Superman before, but making him vulnerable to the point where they replace his heart with a human heart, I think that was just inspired, and therefore led to what would be the natural ending of the character. And I just think, for me, that's what this version will be about more than any other. And I don't want to fixate on that ending, but this is just the fact that they went there and they did it so well, I think is what made this version over the top for me. So.
Yeah.
So, for me, if you've listened to Dive into DC and Made of Steel, you know that the thing that I say the most is I love when our superheroes are just like us. Like, that is really important to me, to have elements on my TV screen to pull in, because they're superheroes and they do things that I can't even fathom. But the parts of the stories that I like the most is when it's these quiet moments where I can identify with my hero. And I struggled with that while we were doing Made of Steel, because I kept wanting to say Kara's human moments, and then I was like, but she's Kryptonian. I understand. But the writers have given us a Clark and a Lois that are filled with these human moments, these moments that are like, hey, this is just like me. They suffer just like me. They struggle and stumble just like me. And those type of things really do something to your heart to endear this character to you. And I feel like in the original Superman movies, it's amazing, but he is still focused mostly on superhero stuff. I love Smallville with all my heart, but it's still focused very much on high school drama stuff. I didn't get to see the Adventures of Lois and Clark. I didn't get to see that yet. So I don't know what that dynamic looks like. But in the newer movies too, they focus on origin and then they focus on supering stuff. So supering stuff. So I really appreciate that we had this time, and that's what a TV series gives us, where a movie doesn't have this luxury. We have this time in this series to see the man inside of the super. And that's what they got to do better, because they had the luxury of episodes versus having to smoosh a storyline into 2 hours. You get time to have this, and you get to know these human elements that I think will always make this show closer to my heart than, the high school drama of Smallville is.
Right. Yeah. I think for me, I think I'll echo a lot of what all of you said. I've always felt, you guys have heard this before, I've always felt DC's heroes are super overpowered. Doesn't matter if it's Superman, Flash, Green Lantern, all these guys, Wonder Woman. To me, they're like gods. And I find it very hard to connect to them, to relate to them, because they're so powered. Like, they're truly what a comic book superhero should be. It's something that's imaginative, something that's out of this world, something that's just like, it would never exist in real life. And that's fun to enjoy that as comic books and stuff. But when I'm watching a TV show, or a movie, it makes it hard for me to relate to these characters. I don't understand what it's like to be invulnerable and be able to stop bullets with my chest or run at the speed of light. I don't know what that's going to be like. I can imagine it, and I can wish, oh man, it'd be so fun to have that. But where this show, I think, excelled was it brought Superman down to a ground level, and it made they basically humanized him and made me as a viewer be able to relate to him, understand that he's just a dad, he's just a father, he's just a reporter, he's just a guy who happens to have powers as well, but he still struggles with all the same things that we struggle with, like you guys were saying. Which is why I always connected to Spider-Man. Spider-Man's my favorite superhero of all time, because he is the most relatable hero of all comic-verse to me. He's just a kid struggling to pay his rent, struggling to get a date with Mary Jane and please his boss or whatever, and yet he's a superhero. So I found Superman and Lois was able to capture that aspect of storytelling and make us feel like we could just go knock on Clark Kent's door and say, hey man, can you help me out with my farm or whatever? Like, it felt like he was attainable and reachable as a human being, which is something that none of the other shows have ever done before. None of the movies, nobody's even come close. Even Smallville, like you said, Green Butterfly, Smallville was just based on teenage angst. It was 10 seasons of high school, and as much as we all love the show, if you really step back and look at it, it doesn't age well in the sense that it is very high schooly, and we never really saw him grow into a man and mature. It was always the same stuff season after season. So as much as we love it, I find this show allowed us to watch Superman grow and change and do things. And like you said, Silvervox, brought him to the end, which is a bold move, something we've never seen before, like Superman dying of natural causes. Whoever would have thought that? This show just did things that none of theirs ever did. All the other shows were the spectacle of Superman. This was the life of Superman. What is it like to be a superhero on Earth? And that's where I think they excelled.
Yep. It was a great way to sum that all up.
Mm-hmm. Now, to counter that question, where did the show not excel at? Where did you guys think it fell short or came up short or didn't do so well? I'm kind of curious, and again, comparing it to the other shows, where do you think this one didn't shine?
I think I'm going to take a little page out of Daryl Washington's book a little bit, and I know this is something all of our shows struggled with, but a giant ensemble cast. Now, this wasn't the same type of ensemble as, say, like Flash or Arrow became or Legends became. They were essentially like all main characters, and they really struggled with that. But even when they brought like our side characters more like to the forefront, like the Cushing family, for example, and how Sophie just sort of ends up being like forgotten and kind of, like the butt of the joke. And then the same thing with the Irons. They took all of these great characters and they had, some really high points where they were able to weave all of their stories together. And then they had some lower points where they were just trying to keep some of them relevant. Even for a season and a half, almost 2 seasons, we were trying to figure out what made Jonathan relevant. And so I think knowing what to do with a giant cast, have all of those storylines seamlessly flowing together all the time while moving characters forward is a tall ask for any creative crew. And I think when I have yet to see a show that can do it extremely well with such big casts as we've had. So I think it's just the nature of the beast. And the show was excellent, and I can find very little fault with it. But I would say having the ensemble and always knowing how to handle the ensemble storylines didn't always work well.
And that's actually not a major deterrent to the show either. Like it doesn't take away from how good the show was, like you just said. So that's the fact that you're struggling to find something really concrete to complain about. That's pretty cool. I
loved this show. I thought it was extremely well done. I'm gonna have a hard time complaining about stuff.
Yeah.
For me, honestly, it's the superheroing. We know what a world without superheroes looks like. And thanks to the Arrowverse, we know what a world with superheroes looks like in terms of how people interact and get together and how superheroes work together in that universe. But getting a fuller picture of a world where there's only one superhero, that was a bit lacking. But honestly, that's okay because that was not the show's focus. The show's focus was not dealing with how the world deals with Superman and how he goes through deciding which thing he's going to save and which thing he's going to leave to the authorities. That was not the focus. The focus was the family and their world and their immediate surroundings. And yes, that meant that they had to bring people to Smallville and they had to bring those things home. But I would have liked to have seen, and maybe if we had 7 seasons, we would have gotten to see how that looked, to see a world that has had one superhero now have a couple to help out Superman. So that's kind of where I feel like we got cheated because of not having 7 seasons. But honestly, that's not a dig because that's not where the focus of the series was. So.
Okay.
So I would say for me, and I'm a little fuzzy on the first couple seasons. It's been a long time since I really dove into them. But for me, I would say probably the element that was lacking was the super villains, right, if you will. Because as much as we talk about the realism of the Kent family, right, what I really appreciated about Bruno Mannheim and about Lex, for that matter, was that they were also on that same realism scale. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, especially in the first two seasons, they were going for major leaps in those supervillains, which I don't think matched the rest of the characters of the show. So, and again, I could be off base on that, but that's my recollection, is that I wanted to see some more realism as a whole throughout the villains that we got. And I know Lex's time was cut short, but I really liked the way they set him up in terms of who he was about and how he came to be, and all those good things. So would have liked to seen a little bit more realism in that factor.
Cool. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Grounded villains. Gotcha.
I don't think I really have anything that hasn't been brought up yet, because mine would also be just handling our cast of characters and balancing them out a little bit better, because it just seemed like we got introduced to certain ones, like John Henry, like Natalie, and then would go really long periods of time without knowing what was going on with them. So I think that I think I just echo Harley on how, a big cast is sometimes hard to manage, but I don't have any other things that I could say that really was not excelling for this show.
I mean, that just is a sentiment to how great this show was. If we're all struggling to really, really put our finger on something that would, tear a show down, or like, I can only rate the show a 7 all across the board just because it lacked, like, we're just not. So it's great. I'm with you guys. I think I might be a little bit opposite you, Silver Rocks. I think the only thing I can think of is that we didn't get enough villains. Like, quite often every season was dealing with one person for the entire season arc, which is good for storytelling because it allows us to really develop each villain. But I would like to have seen just a few more, run-of-the-mill villain of the week type episodes. Just, some guy builds a robotic suit, some guy, gets drunk on red kryptonite or something, and we just see Superman have to fight, because really they established he's the only hero on this planet. Well, who's going to stand up to him? Like, it seemed like his job was relatively easy. All he had to do was stop natural disasters and stop fires and rescue people. Like, that seemed to be the 90% of his superheroing, was helping people in that sense and not actually fighting bad guys, until what the show did would introduce a bad guy, and we'd have to wait until the season finale for the big confrontation. So that was kind of a weak point for me. Like, the same thing with what was that woman from the other that was trying to get all her powers from the alternate universe?
Allie,
yeah, and they had this big battle up in the universe and the galaxy, and they're all that. Like, we waited to the end to see that. So I think for me, I would like to have just seen a lot more Superman versus powered up bad guys, just to give us a little bit of that classic Superman fighting guys.
That was more the Smallville take of just deal with the baddie of the week. So yeah. And I didn't want it every week. It just would be nice to have some fun. Yeah. But at the same time, I agree with you. Make them grounded people. Like, maybe a father lost his daughter in a house fire, and he's pissed off that Superman never came to rescue her. So he builds some type of suit, and he wants to attack Superman and goes after him. Like, stories like that, I think, could have been really interesting to see. How does Clark deal with that? Yeah.
But yeah. All right. Well, next question. If there was one character that was the weakest for you, which one was it? Which character did you not vibe with? Which character did you not think they wrote well enough? There was a couple, I think, off and on, but I'm curious where you guys land on that. Ultimately, after 4 seasons, which one did you feel was not quite the best?
For me, two immediately come to mind, but I'm just going to pick one of them because I am certain someone else will take the other.
You can make it a double if you want. That's fine.
No, it's all right. I'm going to pick Chrissy. I think I was probably the most disappointed in her kind of being relegated to the side and her lack of development, when I do feel like they had a lot of opportunities to take her story in different directions. And I think she started out a little stronger, and then over time she just sort of faded into the background, or had this whole thing going on with Kyle, and I feel like they tried to give her a little more in that final season to wrap up her story, but by that point it was kind of like too little too late. It was like, why are we spending so much time on this at this point? I really feel like a strong independent woman type of character is always done a disservice when they're sort of relegated to the background like that, and they just had so many opportunities with her to give her a little bit more, and they had like glimpses of it. They like started to do something where where she was investigating everything. Was it back in season 2? I think it was the Ali Alston season, and she's doing a lot of good sleuthing, and she had some good storylines, but then just sort of fell off after that. So maybe that was season 3. I don't know. I'm getting them confused because I haven't rewatched them since we covered them. But yeah, my vote's with Chrissy, unfortunately.
All right. I should keep it running tally. Chrissy gets 1. All right. X-Force?
So I took this in a different way. I won't say weakest. I will say one I wanted more of, and that was John Henry. I liked his character a whole lot, and I really wanted to see him and Clark grow into best friends and teammates in richer ways than we got. Again, I think this is all due to having less seasons. But you have somebody who came in as the opposition at the start of the series, who comes in and is now a defender and standing up when Superman can't. And I just wanted to see more because I like Wool's characterization of John Henry, and I just wanted more. Like, it's one of those things where I wanted to see him have storylines of having to be alongside Superman, of really like earning that spot and doing it in a different way. And so I just wanted more. So I wouldn't say weakest. I just will say, like, he's one of the ones that, like, I would have loved to seen more of. Like, I wanted him to be in that role like Dig was in Arrow, where like he came in and he was a support, but he grew into his own thing. And so it just is a testament to the actor, and that I wanted more of that character. So I won't say weak, I just say I wanted more than they were able to give me.
Not enough.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I loved John Henry. I really wanted to see his friendship with Clark. They just become best buddies, and they go out on adventures together. They go out on rescue missions together. I wanted more of that. I agree with you there for sure.
Okay, so that's a great take, Jeff. I would just say for the weakest one for me, or the one I don't even know about weakest is the right term, but the one I just was irritated the most was Sarah.
Okay.
I just felt like she was the plug-in. Like wherever we needed to go with the story, she would go one way, and then wherever they needed to go with the story, she went another way. And so, like, I never felt consistency with her character. Now, she's a teenage girl, right? Not necessarily a consistent point in anybody's life, and I get that. But it kept bothering me that I never knew what to expect from her. Like, I felt like I never had a good, solid character base of who she was to say, oh, well, that was unexpected, or I could see why she might feel that way given a set of circumstances based on the foundation that we've been given. I just felt like the foundation was always moving, and so it really unsettled me with her character.
Yeah, she was very up and down, hit and miss every season. Yeah. Don't Can't disagree with that. Green Butterfly?
I'm going to have to go with Kyle.
Okay.
And I think that it's, you know, I think it's funny, Harley, because I had picked Chrissy first.
Oh, sorry. You and I are the same wavelength.
And I was like, okay, who do I think the second? And so I will have to go with Kyle because, and I don't know if it's because of his storyline, because I always get very upset on my shows when infidelity gets introduced. That's one of the concepts and storylines that always upsets me and makes me turn away from a character and just be disconnected from their storyline now. But the fact that had to be his storyline or part of his storyline is, I think, a weak choice. Like, why did the writers have to take it there? Why did we have to have a really strong, good marriage in Clark and Lois and a broken marriage for Kyle and Lana? Like, is that the only direction we could have gone in? So I just felt very disconnected from that character during the run of the show. So because of that reason, I feel like he was the weakest, because if the writers didn't give me reason to be connected and invested in him, then he's the weakest.
Well, and they didn't give any background as to why he would think that way, right? I mean, I'm with Daryl. Like, who does that?
Yeah.
You know, yeah, who does that to Lana Lang, right? You know, and so they didn't give us any viable, justifiable reason why he would go that way, and so it was out of left field. So
well, and going back to the question, what's the weakest character for you? That made Kyle weak. You have a strong marriage, a strong family, a strong woman in your life. It's so weak of you to just fall prey to having a couple drinks at the bar and going home with the bartender. Like, what the heck? It just made you a completely. I can't respect a character like that because it's just very much true. So mine, for me, it kind of changed as the seasons went on. And if you guys remember, I was really struggling with Jordan for the first 2 seasons. I wasn't comfortable with what they were doing with him. I just found him too needy and wimpy and, oh, mommy, help me. Like, I know he's dealing with his own mental issues or whatever, but I just felt like they focused on it too strongly for his storyline in the season. So I really struggled with him. And then then as he started to get stronger, we had, like you just said, Justina, that we had the breakup of Kyle and Lana, and that to me ruined their entire storyline. I loved having the Cushing family as a second family, as just a regular family for us to watch go through life alongside the super family, and it was great. And the moment you introduced that and broke them up, both of their stories fell apart. I didn't even like Lana's story. Yay, she become the mayor. They had nowhere to go with her. Like, the mayor of a small farm town, that was boring as well. And Kyle and then him and Chrissy, it just got worse and worse and worse. And then it, like you said, Harley, at the top of it, once I just accepted what they did with Kyle, then Chrissy became very annoying, and I could not stand her character. I hated when they tried to make her funny. I hated when they tried to make her, I'm pregnant, now we got married. None of her story was interesting at all, and she ended up being the weakest by the end of it, and the worst one for me. I just didn't care. Every time she came on screen, I'm like, can I fast forward this few 30 seconds or whatever? Like, I had no interest in her at all.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting how the downfall of one character kind of like dominoed into 3, because those are the 3 that immediately come to mind, and also Sarah, like, that come to mind when I was talking about the ensemble cast, like being a problem and not knowing what to do with people, for sure. So
yeah, you're right. It all ties together.
Kind of all brings it together.
Yeah.
I mean, even to a certain extent, John Henry's lack of development, although I think that had more to do with being cut short. I think that we would have gotten a heck of a lot more from him in seasons 5, 6, and 7.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they had to cut it.
And you know what? Honestly, when you mentioned John Henry,
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but he could have done without having a daughter. If he was just by himself, they could have done so much more with him. But his story now had to be, I got to take care of my daughter. I got to be dad. Instead of getting to be Clark's friend and a superhero, the dad story took over for him. He did more of that than anything else.
Well, but I think they could have tied in that aspect of both of them being parents, and there. I really I appreciate the way they tie those two families through Nat. So yeah.
It was really, it was very interesting. Yeah, no, I really liked her. I thought she was like the saving grace in some instances.
I didn't mind that. I was just thinking, I was trying to defend John Henry a little bit. His story kind of got sidelined a bit when she came into the picture. Is all I was meaning.
A little bit. For
where they were with him. Because, I mean, we never revisited his sister that was here on this planet. They, him taking over the DOD. Like, there's so much stuff that was going on that just got sidetracked when Natalie came around. But yeah. Well, you guys mentioned it a couple times, or mentioned him a couple times. Let's ask this question. Do you like this version of Lex Luthor? I want you to explain what you liked about him, what you disliked about him, and compare him to past versions of Lex. Because we all know we've had if there's been massive amounts of differences in a character, it's been how Lex has been portrayed in the movies and the various TV shows. So, I mean, Smallville, Supergirl, and the movies, very different, very, very different versions of Lex Luthor. So where does this Lex fit in for you?
I loved this version of Lex Luthor, which I think is actually a very unpopular opinion. I don't know if necessarily on this podcast, but definitely in the greater Superman and Lois fandom. But I really liked him. I liked him being just a dude. Like, I mean, not that he's really ever like super powered in anything else, but the realism, I do feel like they took that to almost kind of like an extreme with him. And I think in some ways that was good. And maybe in some ways that could be something like I disliked about the character, his tendencies to be extremely like explosive in his anger that sometimes felt almost overacted a little bit in like some of those scenes. So having, kind of like those explosions, I didn't always fit as well with a Lex Luthor type of character who is, from past incarnations supposed to be a little bit more cunning and calm and calculating. So I definitely felt like they took that in a completely different direction. But I liked most of what Michael Cudlitz did with that character, and the fact that it was a little bit more like down to earth. I thought it was an interesting twist to have him in prison for the majority of Superman's story, and then kind of dealing with the aftermath of that, once he was released from prison, which is another completely different take on Lex. Some of like the past ones that sort of stand out to me, of course, I know everybody kind of talks about the Supergirl version of Lex Luthor with John Cryer. I really didn't like that version of Lex. I'll be honest. That's probably my least favorite incarnation of Lex Luthor was the Supergirl version. Sorry, guys. And then Jesse Eisenberg from The Return of Superman. He always sort of like stands out to me. I know a lot of people hated him, and I didn't love him, but I didn't hate him either. He kind of had like that. He kind of brought like a weird vibe to Lex. He was maybe a little bit too not like cunning's not the right word, a little bit too man in the chair, like, if that makes any sense. Like he felt almost like he should be like a side character in the way that he was portrayed. Like, he didn't feel very strong in a lot of ways, but he definitely felt like very cunning. So I think they took this version of Luthor almost like as a 180 from that, is they wanted him to be like very like kind of like strong, very powerful, very bold, very, out there. They did show him to be like several steps ahead, but it wasn't always like very first apparent, like when we were first introduced to the character. So those are thoughts.
Interesting. I did not like Jesse Eisenberg at all. He is bottom of the list for me.
A lot of people don't like him.
Too spastic, too crazy. It's like he was on speed and cocaine all at the same time, and just that was not Lex to me. But anyway,
he's very frenetic.
I'll get to mine. Next, X-Force.
So this was a different take on his origin story. The things that drove him to be a villain were totally different than what we've seen before. It's very different from the comics. I still like Michael Rosenbaum's Lex the best from the comic book side of it, because you've got the whole dynamic of being friends with Clark and the whole aspect of the business and all those type of things. But Cutlass's take was a brutal take on Lex, and it made it a powerful and a great dynamic between him and Clark, where you had this vendetta against the family, and it was personal, and you had those family dynamics of his daughter being taken away from him, and so it was just a totally different take on things. And I think we compare the villains, making the heroes better. And I think they did a good job of making this a different version of Lex, but one that went up against Clark in ways that felt threatening and worthy of him being there. And also playing him off as a villain of Lois's rather than just Clark and Superman was a big point that we haven't seen. And so I like that they made him the villain of both lead characters in this series. So if we're talking true to the comics, I'm still going to say Rosenbaum, but I love Cutlass's take in this series. So that's what I like about it.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. And yeah, Cutlass did an amazing job in his portrayal and all that. And if we're going through the list of everybody, I tend to land on Kevin Spacey in Superman Returns. Oh
yeah, wow.
I think his Lex to me is pretty much the epitome of what I want to see out of that character. Okay. The calculating, the steps ahead, the mannerisms, the personality, the anger when necessary, but more just the simmering. Like he's always just simmering, and until the explosions need to happen, from him. So yeah, so that's kind of where I go with the top of my list. Now I'm only halfway through Smallville, so I'm not sure how Rosenbaum's Lex will resolve as such, but yeah, that's kind of where I land on my where the bar is for me is Kevin Spacey. So
cool.
I think this version of Lex was a little bit too serious for me. It seems like all the versions of Lex that I had experienced before had a little bit more flair for the drama and maybe a little almost comedic moment there. Like, look, they're very over the top people. And so that's what I've learned to expect from Lex Luthor. But the thing that's important to note here is this is the Lex Luthor. Michael is the Lex Luthor that fits this show. All the other Lexes that I'm thinking about that I do enjoy more and would rank higher than this actor as my favorite Lex because of their portrayal of the character. I have to still preface my answer with I still think they hired the best man of the job for Superman and Lois. And you had such a short time with him comparatively to Michael Rosenbaum, who you have for all the seasons of Smallville for the most part. There's only a very short break in there for him. So this actor did not get that laid out for him. He didn't have a long time to build as a character. And my favorite is John Cryer, because he reminded me of that over-the-top version of my first Lex of Gene Hackman, because he had that sort of like shouting, bubbly, over-the-top, like larger than life personality. So when I met him on Supergirl, I was like, yes, this is what I expect of the character. And then I was watching Smallville around that same time and getting to know a quieter version of the character in Michael Rosenbaum. But as much as this is not my favorite Lex, they definitely knew what kind of Lex they needed for their show.
All right, so I said it on Superman and Lois when we were covering it that this is my favorite version of Lex ever, and I was really sticking true to that. But then, Silvervox, you reminded me about Kevin Spacey's version. I completely forgot about him, and I think I have to agree with you. He really was, I think, everything that I think Lex was supposed to be. He was super smart, super conniving, stealthy, a genius level intellect, but had this evil streak behind that facade, behind that mask of, I'm this rich businessman and I'm trying to help the world and I'm a philanthropist and all this kind of stuff. But underneath that, behind the scenes, he would do nefarious things and nobody saw it. And I think Kevin Spacey's captured that entire persona really, really well. I like this Lex. I like Michael's version of Lex because we have to remember that he's been in prison for 11 years or 12, what was it, 19 years, whatever they said it was. He got his life ripped away from him. This was a version of Lex we've never seen before, a Lex that got married, a Lex that had a kid. We've never seen this version of Lex, so to have all of that taken away from him, to me makes sense that this Lex would dive off a cliff and crash and go into ultra-violent mode and go into revenge mode because he was so powerful for so long. Like, we don't know what this Lex was in all the years fighting Superman before he got put to prison. We just assume it was the same Lex that we've always had, but to have all of that taken away from him, all because of Superman and Lois, I could see the downfall of Lex, and being in prison and having to survive in prison would change him. And I know I explained that on the show, but I think it would change him in a way that would turn him into the type of Lex that we got for this final season of Superman. And that's where I really appreciate him, because I think Michael's performance was off the charts amazing, just always teetering on the edge. And it just took a little push for him to lose control. And eventually he completely lost it, and it was all about revenge. I'm going to kill everybody. I don't care anymore. Where it's unfortunate is we only had 10 episodes, and they had to hurry that along. I would love to have seen 3 seasons of that slowly burning and building up to him finally breaking loose in the end. Would have been much better. So it was kind of a crash course, but yeah, he is definitely up there for me. I knew the actor from The Walking Dead, and this is such a different character for him to play. It really made me appreciate the guy's performance capabilities, for sure. Well, let's talk about our main two, Tyler and Bitsy, Tyler Hoechlin and Bitsy Tulloch. Their portrayal on Clark and Lois, where would you guys rank them? Where would you put them on the charts compared to all the other iterations that we've had? Movies, TV shows, cartoons, it doesn't matter. How did these guys take this role and basically emblazon it on your heart? Because I love these guys, but I want to know what you guys feel.
I think that they have become my all-time favorites. it's very difficult to be, one of the original Supermen in Christopher Reeves. I mean, he just really kind of embodied that. But I don't know, like I really enjoyed Tyler's take on everything, and especially enjoyed his portrayal of Clark, because he just managed to make him like endearing and heartwarming and nerdy and like all of these things, like all at the same time, without any of it taking away from the character. Like in every way, it was almost like a strength to him. And I really loved Bitsy as Lois. I mean, there's been a lot of, there's a lot of like different versions of Lois, I guess. I am interested to see in the newest Superman movie, Rachel Brosnahan's take on her, because I adore her. I think she is amazing. And if anyone can edge out Bitsy for me, it might be her. But I loved everything that Bitsy did, everything she brought to the character. I really felt like she brought her all and kind of left everything, left nothing, like she didn't hold anything back. Like it was all there, it was all real. And especially with like the cancer storyline, I think her acting was just a testament to the writing as well. But I mean, she did a fantastic job. I love them.
Yes.
So, hands down, Tyler, because he was the best at playing both sides of the character. Christopher was amazing, but I think Tyler surpassed him in the realism, like you said, Harley, on Clark's side. It's the ability to play both characters. I mean, we've had different actors. We often talk about this in the Batman realm because, which character are they playing best? But I think Tyler, for me, played both so well, especially in the modern day era of things. He got both. And I think that's really, really hard to do. As far as the Lois, Bitsy was wonderful, but I say she's a little bit edged out by a hair by Margot Kidder, because I like because the journalism and just the little bit of humor that she brought into it, but it's not by much. But honestly, it's hard to compare because we're talking about the same character, but at two different points in their lives. So it's not like comparing apples and apples. You're comparing apples and oranges, because this version, that Bitsy plays has been through so much that we didn't get to see in the character of Margot. So, but I'm still going to say Margot Kidder by hair. So
Nice.
So, for me, nobody rises above Christopher.
Okay.
But I will say that on the balance issue of playing Clark well, playing Superman well, I think Tyler gets it better than anybody else has. The one reservation that I have with this series, though, is that I didn't really get a sense of Superman that much in the series, and I think that was the point, right? This was about Clark. This was about his family life and how Superman fit into that. And so I think the Superman moments that we got, honestly, were kind of few and far between. And I mean, I wasn't lacking for it. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, this show's terrible, I never see Superman. But it was hard. It's definitely hard for me to say, oh, Tyler really meets the Superman persona all that well, just because I didn't see it all that much. So, again, maybe a tragedy to more seasons that they might have been able to explore that better. But, on the Lois side, though, I will say that Bitsy does take over top of the list. And it wasn't until the cancer storyline. The first two seasons, I felt like she was really an overreactive mom. Like everything just did her in. And Having 14 teenagers myself, I can totally relate with that. But I just felt like that's the way they were portraying her over and over and over again. But I think the depth of what Bitsy brought to the role really, really came out in season 3, and I think carried through in season 4. I think her work in season 4 was phenomenal, and I think that's what brings her up to the top of my list.
Right. Yeah. Butterfly.
I have to echo Silverbox a little bit here, saying that Christopher Reeve is my favorite Superman, but I do feel like Tyler is now my favorite Clark. And we got to spend so much time with him as Clark, which is, like I said, something that the movies didn't have as much time with. Because even though they did cut how many seasons they were going to do of this wonderful show, we still got more hours of these characters in these roles than we did in any of our movie iterations. And as much as we got to spend time with Clark in Smallville, and just Clark because he's never Superman in that series, he didn't develop that much. You know, he was sort of the same Clark all the time, where Tyler really took the role of Clark and embraced it and developed it and showed us sides of Clark and Superman that were totally new to us. So I would say that I have to split it, as many people have online, for these heroes that have the alter egos. It's very common for somebody to say, well, this one was a better Clark and this one was a better Superman, or this one was a better Bruce Wayne and this one was a better Batman. So I have to split it again, as is so common, because of how much I do enjoy Tyler Hoechlin's Clark. And I have to really give it to Bitsy for Lois Lane, because I walk into this series coming off of all those seasons of Grimm, and I was really concerned because I know Tyler came from Teen Wolf, but I didn't watch Teen Wolf. So for me, this was my, when they talk about the advantages of casting like an unknown actor to play something, because you're not going to think of him as something else. Well, Tyler, even though he came from a popular show, was not known to me. So he was unknown to me, where Bitsy wasn't. And I was like, am I going to be able to switch gears? Am I going to be able to see her as this character after spending all these other years watching her as a Nora character? And it's going to be a test of a great actress to do that for me. And Bitsy delivered. I think it's funny that when they come out for this show, when they started doing press for the show, before it even premiered, she started going by Elizabeth more and Bitsy less. And where, all her stuff in Grimm, when her name would come up on the screen, it was Bitsy and everything. And all of a sudden, when she started doing press for Superman and Lois, she started going by Elizabeth more again. And what was interesting to me, as right from the beginning, I didn't see her Grimm character anymore. She fell into Lois, and it was like she was a whole new person to me. Like, oh, I've never met Elizabeth Tulloch before. Let me fall into this character. And she 100% did. So she is my number one Lois.
Awesome. Interesting. I love everybody's versions and takes. This is cool. For me, and I kind of explained it on the show a little bit already, but Tyler Hoechlin now, here and now, is Superman and is Clark Kent for me. I don't think we've had an actor that has completely been able to envelop everything about those characters that we know from the last 80 plus years of Superman so completely And again, and I bring it back to making me feel like I can understand the Superman. I can connect to the Superman because I've never been able to before. That's why Tyler wins it for me, hands down, because I was able to connect to him and relate to him. Where I explained it on Tomorrow's Legends, I think, because we have to remember again, this isn't a future. This is Superman and Lois 40 years after, or 20 something years after they've been married. Like this, we've never seen this timeline for Superman before. All other versions have either been Superman as a teenager or Superman when he's out on his own, and we have to watch him meet Lois and go through the romance and get a job at the Daily Planet and all that kind of stuff. This show is long past that. So I look at Christopher Reeve started it all. He is our Superman from the beginning. We saw his origin and off he went. And then Tyler takes, hey, we watched Christopher Reeve marry Lois and their life start together. Tyler takes that role, takes the torch essentially. Thank you, Christopher. I'm going to do the role. I'll honor your portrayal. Takes the torch and continues the story. The two of them are like this to me. They are one and the same. They both have portrayed, I think, both sides of the character almost the same way. I think Tyler really, really honored Christopher Reeve and how he did both sides of the role. So they, to me, are joined in just continuing the character. So that's where I feel for Tyler, and I wish we got more. I would love to see him be able to get to play the character again somewhere down the line. Now, Lois is an interesting one. I love Bitsy. I think she is the best actress that has ever played the part. Her sheer performance, and like you said, John, in the last season, she was over the top with everything that this character had to deal with. Her emotions brought me to tears so many times. Watching her dad die, watching like everything that, like, she screams like nobody screams. It's amazing. I just think performance-wise, she is my favorite Lois for sure. But what bugged me about her on the show, and one of you mentioned it, she emotionally reacted to things and then would make stupid decisions because she's emotionally reacting. And I never felt Lois to be that way. I always felt Lois was level-headed and always thought things through before she made a decision. I never experienced Lois just having an emotional reaction to something and then going and doing something stupid, putting herself in harm's way, thinking she could do what Superman could do or whatever. I did not like that about her character here. And for that, it brings her down a little bit as not my favorite Lois. My Lois is, I loved The Adventures of Lois and Clark. I loved Terry Hatcher. I had a massive crush on Terry Hatcher for so many years, and getting to watch her play this character, I kind of had a bit of a soft spot for her, but I loved that take of Lois. Lois, she was an action hero. She was smart. She was a great reporter. She never gave up. She was relentless in finding the answers and the stories. And that, to me, is what Lois is. Lois Lane is the world's best reporter, investigative journalist, whatever you want to call it, and she dug to get the stories. And that's what Terry Hatcher did. Plus, she was also not scared, and she would run in, and help things out, but she was never dumb about it. So I appreciated that. Then comes Erica Durance on Smallville, and they basically sexified Lois. They brought in the sexiest, most beautiful version that they could, and that won over a lot of people's viewers. It did me. I still have a crush on Erica Durance. Because of Smallville, I followed her into all of her other work afterwards. She did that hospital, that medical show, Saving Hope, and she was phenomenal in that. And I watched her develop her acting skills as she went along too, and she has become a very good actress and very, very good at delivering emotions when she needs to. But Smallville just made me love her because she's, she was sexy to watch and she was funny and she was a side of Lois that we never seen. Like she took what Margot gave us in attitude and exemplified it. Like she gave all kinds of attitude to Clark on Smallville, and I had a lot of fun with it. So her and Terry Hatcher are kind of neck and neck, taking turns leading the way for me for favorite Lois. But Bitsy was the best actor. I
appreciate everything that you just said there, Martin, but I do have to say, Lois Lane making impetuous decisions and going off and doing her thing, no matter the danger level and all that, that's kind of her thing.
That's kind of just what I say.
You think so?
That's exactly who Lois Lane is.
Textbook Lois Lane.
Well, no, you're not wrong. You're right. I just feel like Bitsy's version of it, I think it just bugged me the way I didn't really get that feeling from the other Loises as much. Bitsy they really highlighted that aspect of it.
I think the aspect here, though, is that she is a wife and mother, which makes the stakes of her impetuous decisions bigger and deeper, and therefore, that stands out. I don't know if you've seen there's a new animated version of the Superman story, My Adventures with Superman. It's on Max.
I've only saw the first episode.
Yeah. So the voice actress there, Alice Lee, and the way that they portray Lois in that is exactly the same thing. I mean, she's constantly making impetuous decisions, and she and Clark are in the process of getting together. My point being, I think it bothered you so much because in this setting, in the Superman and Lois setting, so many more people counted on her, particularly her sons. And so, those types of decision making you don't really want out of a mother, right? That's true.
Right.
And so
that's a good point.
Yeah, so I think that's why it kind of stood up to you. But that is really her MO to do that. Yeah. So
that's a good point. See, I'm glad you tore it apart for me. That makes sense. You just can't beat Erica and Terry Hatcher for me.
I don't disagree with either of those.
All right. Well, one last question to go through here, guys. Should Superman and Lois have been allowed to run its full 7 seasons? And add to that, if they got 7 seasons, what storylines, what villains would you like to have seen? What paths would you like to see the characters take for 3 more seasons?
Obviously, yes. They should have had their 7 seasons. I think they would have been, had they been given it, I think they would have been tempted to go longer, and I think 7 would have been the perfect amount. It would have been nice if we could have seen those 3 extra seasons. Yeah. As far as like villains and storylines, I mean, obviously all of season 4 was entirely compressed, and it should not have been. Like, definitely you could see which elements would have been given more space to breathe in other seasons. I think everything with Lex's story would have been more drawn out, but I also think it would have given us time to sit with that character a little bit more and maybe appreciate Michael's version a little bit more, and kind of like what he brings to the character, understanding what makes Lex tick, all of those sorts of things. Of course, since they name dropped Brainiac, everybody would have wanted to see their take on Brainiac. I thought what they did Bizarro and Doomsday was absolutely brilliant. I mean, Death of Superman is like the pinnacle of storytelling, Superman storytelling for me. So they hit it out of the park with that. And so that would have been what I wanted to see, and I did get to see that. I'd say like the only other thing is if they had gone back to some of those threads they kind of left dangling. Like, they left Ollie Alston kind of dangling there. They left Bizarro Jonathan kind of dangling there, like rotting in a prison cell. Like, we got some closure with like Tal Rowe and him going to the Bizarro universe, and then that universe being cut off. So I was okay with how they ended that storyline. But maybe some of those threads that they left dangling would have been nice to see them pick back up in a later season.
Right. Cool.
So for me, yes, 100%.
Is it a dumb question to ask? Yeah.
No. Did they end well? Yes. But so much, like we said, had to be condensed down, things glossed over. I would have loved to see their take on Brainiac. I would have loved to see more of the Super Fam of Steel working together, of getting to see the 5 heroes, like, pursing things out and like, okay, these 2 go here and these 2, whatever. Getting to see that, and getting to see those family beats that I was talking about, of getting to see the guys develop as heroes, getting to see John Henry and Clark become friends in and outside of work, to get to see those things truly develop. Now, some of this stuff, they definitely would have split out to multiple seasons, but yeah, it would have been great to actually see some of the Super Ring together as a group, because that shot of the 5 of them flying in the air was amazing, and I just wanted more. I just wanted more of those group working together and being those heroes together. So yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I go right along with that. And what we got in the epilogue with, I say epilogue, but what we got there with Jordan and Jonathan and their families, like I would have taken a whole season and watch what Superman was able to do to mentor them as grown men, as heroes, as fathers. Because that was such a critical part of the show. So I would have stuck with that for as long as they wanted to show it. So
yeah,
that's where I would have liked to have seen things develop.
Cool. Where you at, Justina?
I obviously would have loved to see more seasons of this show, and because it was established with John Henry and Nat that, and with Bizarro Superman and with Doomsday, that other Earths did exist, other realities did exist, and somehow these beings did make it to their Earth. So even they could have kept if they had more time, they could still have kept their storyline true of, hey, Superman's the only super on our Earth. But knowing that other heroes could get here, like John Henry and Nat did, more seasons would have allowed for that, and would have been able to accommodate that, and I still would have held out for wanting a Supergirl, even if it was a different Supergirl that he doesn't know about at all, because he was a baby and she was stuck in the Phantom Zone. So that storyline that is common in the comics would still work out, and they could still stay separated from the Arrowverse and make their own thing. But they did bother to establish that there are other Earths in this universe, because we learned that, Doomsday had a family, and we learned that that John Henry was married to Lois on his Earth and had their daughter Natalie. And so even though they said we're not Earth Prime, we're something else, they could have still brought these characters in, because they established early on that there are ways for people from other Earths to land here. So if they would have had more time, I would have really liked to see maybe not the Arrowverse Supergirl, but a Supergirl that Clark really never knew that she survived. Whether they choose to do it on that that Kara lived on that remnant of Krypton set up by her father, or if they chose the Phantom Zone. Either way, Clark may be totally unaware of her and could have this sense of a blood family to go with what he has with his sons now. And to echo what Silverbox was saying, to see him mentor his sons in fatherhood and find out, does this Kryptonian blood, even when you go down to a quarter in the grandkids, like, are they going to be super? Like, what is this going to look like as the family line goes on?
Yeah. All of the above. Everything you guys all said, all of the above. Like, it's... Yes, of course it needed to go 7 seasons. I could have watched 25 seasons of this show. Like, they could have went until Tyler and Bitsy were actually 75 years old and dying of old age. I would have been happy. But I think for sure that the hints that they gave us, or that the not the hints, the teasers they gave us of Brainiac. I mean, a full season of Brainiac being the bad guy and Superman having to figure out how do you fight that type of supercomputer intelligence would have been so much fun without Lex being around, like full on Brainiac. It would have been great. Giving Lex more time to stretch out, like let him take 3 seasons to develop this story arc instead of crunching it down would have been great. Watching the boys learn from their dad and having the 3 of them go out and fight crime and save the world would have been so much fun to see. The effects budget would have had to gone through the roof, though, for sure. More time with John Henry. Yeah. More time with John Henry, I agree with. I would like to have seen his character get to develop more. Get rid of Kyle and Chrissy. Get them off the show. Totally done with them. Lana, you're going to have to fix Lana's story somehow. I was completely bored with her in the end. Although they did get her to marry John Henry, which I still haven't landed on whether I'm okay with that or liked that yet. I don't know if they had the chemistry to be the next couple on the show. I don't know. I'm not sure about that, but could have been interesting to see for sure. But yeah, I just think having to rush it less, having to watch, we know Superman has a human heart, and watch that slowly debilitate him over 3 seasons would have been a longer journey to get to go through than having it condensed in 10 episodes. So yeah, there's so much. I mean, there's other lesser Superman villains we could have watched. Brainiac could have just been 1 season. Lex could have been kind of in the background for a couple seasons. You know, he's background and he comes and he goes and he comes and he goes. I think all of that would have, as Lex does, instead of making him the main guy for the entire season, I think it would have been great. But yeah, all the what ifs, if onlys. That's all we, well, let's wrap up this fantastic discussion with what you guys tend to do over on Diving into DC. You tend to rate everything at the end of your discussion. After you've talked about it all, you say, all right, now that we talked, how do we feel? What's our rating? So we're going to do that for this show here. We're going to give our final series rating for Superman and Lois, and X-Force is going to start us off.
So I gave this one 9.5 stories never told before. I may have beef with DC, Warner Brothers, and the CW for not letting them say this was not a part of the Arrowverse from the start. I really have beef with the series ending several seasons early. However, this series had a great run. They took characters we knew and put them at an age and a point of life we have never seen in live action. They took characters and villains we knew and spun them on their ears. And they took obscure characters and used them in good ways. Listen, I like Superman. I was, more of a Batman guy like I talked about earlier in the podcast. But this series, specifically Tyler and Bitsy, changed that for me. I'm still more of a Batman guy, but this series made me love Superman more. And bottom line, out of everything I've podcasted on, all those series, this is my favorite. I mean, there may be something that comes along that eclipses that, but...
Green Lanterns?
Well, maybe, but like I said, it's going to be hard to eclipse that. And, Gotham was the first one that got me going, but yeah, this one has quickly become my favorite, and it's because of all the things it was and how it approached it. So, yeah.
Right. Excellent stuff.
All right. Well, I think I'm landing on also a 9.5. It went by so fast. I pretty much agree and echo everything that Jeff just said. It should not have been cut short early, but there were so many external factors affecting it. There's nothing we could do. At least they were given the opportunity to finish their story, and they were able to do it well. I've always been more of a Batman person myself, and so I never thought that I would kind of really get into this show like the way that we all did. I think that's definitely a testament to the writing and the creative. The acting certainly as well didn't hurt. But I didn't really feel like I was going to get sucked into it. I was very skeptical when you guys first pitched that we should cover this, and it was always very pleasantly surprised throughout that entire first season, and it hooked me. It got me hooked in. So I never would have thought that I would be here saying like this is my favorite representation of Superman and Lois on the CW of all places. Like, come on.
Yeah.
But it was extremely well done. I'm definitely sad it got cut short, but I am happy with how they were able to wrap it up. I do think it was well done. It didn't feel as rushed as it should have felt, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. Here. Green Butterfly.
I am giving this 10 out of 10 heartfelt conversations I will never forget.
Ooh.
Because for me, it was always the quiet moments, the moments on the porch, the moments in the kitchen that made more of an impact on me than, big fights or the action moments. It was the family moments. I'll still always remember the painting the living room scene. They took time to do these little things that I just nobody else ever had done. Watching them as a family paint the living room, and Clark hears like a bridge falling down and on the other side of the world, and he flies away. But I mean, they just did that so beautifully. But those quiet moments is why I'm never gonna forget, and the fact that they chose to take time for them makes them a 10 for me.
Wow. High praise.
So I'm going to go 9.9. More people that know who Superman is. You guys heard my feedback. I think that episode in this series will always stand out as one of Superman's defining moments. And I mean, Superman, the canon, the everything, the way they chose to go for these big swings. That's what this series will be characterized to me. It is its own self-contained box, right? It does not fit in, I don't think, with any other canon, and that's fine. I mean, they told, literally, they went back in flashback and told the beginning, the middle, and the end of this story. It is complete. It is done. And the way they chose to handle some of those things, like revealing his identity, showing the end of the character, some of these really, really big swings, makes this series stand out, much farther than other things have attempted to do. So yeah, can't say enough good. I mean, we can nitpick this, that, and the other, but it's barely a tenth of a point, if that.
Wow, look at the two people that didn't podcast on it for 4 seasons are giving it the highest rankings. That's awesome.
Well, I mean, I was very vocal. I was in the same place.
Yeah,
Jess was when they were talking about this series. When they showed some things, I was like, "This is what is the point of this?" They did not sell this well. I will just say that. But the proof was in the watching. Right, and hopefully the community came along on board, just from your podcast and from all the critical reviews that were like, this is outstanding television. This is not superhero television. This is outstanding television, and I think that's what this series to me will be marked by.
Yes, exactly so. Well, I don't know how much more I can add to it after everything you guys said. I agree with all of it, but I'm also going to land at like a 9.5. It did go by too fast, and it was cut too short, and I want more. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but what this show did for me, it is the best show the Arrowverse has given us, by far, bar none. Simply because for a TV show that's about Superman, a virtually indestructible, invulnerable being that can barely be stopped by anything, The fact that they could ground him and make me connect and relate to him, unlike any other show has ever done, is where it won me over. Arrow kicked things off for us, and I love Arrow. It's got a soft spot in my heart because of everything that Arrow gave us. But when you compare the stories of Arrow versus this, there really is no comparison. Superman and Lois just taught us about family and loyalty and bravery and heartache and all these different things of what it basically reminded you of what is really, really important in life, and everything else is secondary. Family and friendship and loyalty to those people in your life. That's what should come beyond everything else, above everything else. And it makes you, it's a TV show that made you look at your own life and go, yeah, I could do better. I can talk to my wife better here. I can handle this situation with my kids better because I saw how they did on Superman. Like, it's funny, like everyone makes fun about TV shows. TV show is not real. It's, you shouldn't try to live up to those expectations. But this show was able to show us how things could be done. It wasn't unrealistic. It wasn't far-fetched. It wasn't fantasy. It was real, and it felt real. And that's why so many episodes had us in tears, or had us laughing, or had us on the edge of our seat, because it felt real and we could relate to it. And I, like you guys, Superman wasn't always my favorite. One of my best buddies loved Superman to death, and I was always a Flash guy. But so we always had that, the debate of who's faster, and we all know Flash is faster. Hands, doesn't matter. But I was a Marvel guy. I grew up reading Marvel. I grew up watching Marvel. Everything to me was Marvel. Spider-Man, X-Men, all that kind of stuff. I never was a DC person, a DC kid. And here yet we created a podcast network that solely covers DC shows until we introduced X-Men. We talk about DC, so this has allowed me to really get into DC content and understand where these characters come from and their stories and their journeys. And Superman and Lois gave me that more than any other show that we have covered. It gave me a journey of Clark and Lois, and it's one that I'm never going to forget, and I will revisit it one day just to get to that finale, because I think it's one of the best finales I've ever seen on any TV show. How do you end a story? How do you end the story of Superman? These guys did it for us. This is the way you do it. As heartbreaking as it was, Green Butterfly, to me, I cannot think of any other way to end the story. It was just absolutely beautiful, and the series was absolutely beautiful. And I'm so glad we covered it. It was my favorite one that we have done so far. So there you go. Thank you guys for this awesome network get-together. Wrap up a series. We did it for Flash. Now we're doing it for Superman and Lois. Pretty cool. Pretty awesome, guys. I hope all our listeners enjoyed it, and I hope everybody out there is going to come back for the Justice League. Now that the new year is here, we're going to dive into Justice League, and we expect feedback. We'd love to hear from everybody. Send in their emails and voicemails and join us on this fun journey. We're going to take a less serious approach. It's going to be a fun thing, a cartoon. We're going to just laugh and be goofy and have a good time with it and act like big kids. That's what Justice League is going to be. So if you guys would like to be part of that show, this is what you do.
If you would like to be a part of the show, you can send in your feedback to Tomorrow's Legends Podcast at gmail.com. You can also reach us on Twitter at Tomorrow's Legends. We'd love you to join our Facebook page at facebook.com/groups/Tomorrow's Legends and become part of the community.
All right. That wraps us up. Again, thank you, guys, John, Justina, for joining us, becoming part of the Legends final farewell to Superman and Lois. It's great to have you guys here.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Love to catch everybody over on our side of the street there at Dive Into DC. We are covering Creature Commandos, which is the first thing out of the block for the James Gunn DCU Gods and Monsters installment. So I watched an episode this morning about an animated weasel that had me in tears. So when I tell you that this is quality stuff, it is quality stuff. So yeah, get in there with us. We're covering Creature Commandos. That coverage will start next week on January 7th. So yeah, check us out www.facebook.com/groups/dive into DC podcast. And you can find us everywhere at Dive into DC.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Justina, any final words?
I am just so thankful to Tomorrow's Legends for covering Superman and Lois so beautifully for all these seasons. I always enjoy taking these adventures with you, and thank you so much for inviting us on so that we could share our final thoughts on this final episode.
Excellent. Like I said, I appreciate your guys' perspectives, and that's why I love listening to your show. Just I already explained what you both do and bring to this network. I'm very grateful for you guys here, for sure. Harley, X-Force, final goodbyes.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year from the Cybercast Network.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Happy New Year. It was a great run. It was a great show. I'm definitely going to miss it now that it's gone, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It was so good.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up, and let's wish everybody a great 2025. We'll see you guys in all our next stuff that we cover. So, from all of us here, this is The Flash, signing off.
And this is Harley Quinn. I'm out.
This is X-Force 11, so say we all.
This is the Silver Vox. We'll see you over at Belle Reve Prison.
This is your eye in the sky, green butterfly. Stay safe, everyone, and have a super week.
Tomorrow's Legends is not affiliated with CBS, Warner Brothers, HBO, or the CW. We're a fan-made podcast for entertainment purposes only and are part of the Cybercast Network. Be sure to check out our partner shows, The Mandalore and Dive into DC, covering your favorite Star Wars and DC Comics properties. Thanks for listening.